going to be a bit of a wait until something else interesting comes out. So I figured that I'd talk about something else that's very similar to Tomb Raider, so consider this a continuation of my last review. That's right, it's Far Cry 3. Both Far Cry 3 and Tomb Raider have the main character stuck on an island, and in order to survive, they both had to evolve into a warrior of some sorts. The reason why I consider this to be a continuation of my Tomb Raider review is because I want to compare it to Far Cry 3, as it has the same story, but it does it better. Though I do actually think that Tomb Raider is a better game overall, as it has a better gameplay and smoother pacing and stuff. Far Cry 3 is a first-person shooter with sandbox elements thrown all over it. And since this was a first-person shooter made somewhere in the 21st century, you can expect to be looking down the barrel of the gun most of the time, and small but rechargeable health, which you recharge by hiding in a corner and sucking on your thumb for a while. It works about as well as every other first-person shooter that came out after Call of Duty 4, so it's uninteresting and boring to talk about, but it is serviceable. The sandbox elements are a little bit more interesting to talk about, if only because they present more problems. The entire island is open for you to travel on, but you won't be able to see all of your map until you climb on every freaking radio tower and flip a switch that somehow unlocks more of the map for you. This part is very similar to that of Assassin's Creed, and no less annoying. It just kills the pacing of the main story. It also kills motivation to explore anything on the island, as climbing up on a radio tower pretty much shows you everything there is to the island. There are a lot of radio towers to climb on in order to unlock the map, and they're very far between, so most of the gameplay just felt like this. That's done. You will also be hunting a lot of animals in this game, and that pretty much kills the pacing too. Sure, it's optional, but you need to collect animal hides in order to improve your equipment. It gets monotonous very quickly as it involves more traveling, but it's almost worse in this case, as they always seem to be on the far end of the island from where you are. Aside from all the problems I had with this game, there are also stealth sections, which surprisingly work for a first-person shooter. Most of the time, it's ideal for the camera to be in third person, so you can be aware of your surroundings. Because of how important it is to be able to know what's around you and be able to move freely, I'm halfway convinced that stealth just doesn't work in the first person. But then I remember that these thief games exist. The reason why it doesn't work in other games is because they're forced in and they don't give you the proper mechanics or tools to be able to sneak around. It works in Far Cry 3, however, because mechanics involve freedom and taking advantage of your environment in order to outsmart your enemies. The game gives you plenty of bushes to hide in and rocks to throw to distract guards around you. What was that? Some guard outposts have animals trapped in cages that you can shoot open for the... Oh crap. Anyway, as I was saying, you can open up the cages in order to unleash the predator to attack the bad guys for you. You also have the ideal weapon for these situations, which is the bow and arrow. I actually don't have a prop for this. The only interesting thing about the bow and arrow is that they make quick, deadly stealth kills. That's it. They're silent. It's refreshing to see a game that gets stealth right every once in a while. In fact, it gets it so well done that it makes you wonder why some other games just can't do stealth as well, even if that's the main part of their game. The gameplay isn't the most innovative or original, and a lot of times it can get pretty tedious. The reason why I think Tomb Raider has better gameplay is because no matter what you're doing, you're always still pushing the story forward. It paces itself properly. However, serviceable Call of Duty-esque sections and good stealth does make this game enjoyable and fun to play for the most part. And finally to the story aspect, which is not just better than Tomb Raider, but it's surprisingly good on its own merits. At least it's good for video games. I mean, had this been on any other medium like a book or a movie, it would have been a strictly average story. As far as games I can think of in recent memory, this game gets right everything it needs to get right, even if it does fall apart towards the end. Jason Brody is the protagonist in this game. Not to be confused with Adrian Brody, who also has experience getting lost on islands and killing monsters. Jason is on vacation with some of his friends. They go skydiving, and then they land on the wrong island with bad guys. And even badder guys. Jason's friends get captured and his brother gets murdered. And in order for him to rescue his friends, he has to learn the skills of a badass. Yes, trench coat, sunglasses, guns akimbo equal a badass. Deal with it. The problem with Tomb Raider's story is that it never showed us everything we needed to know about Laura's life. The game gives us enough to let us know that Laura isn't as apt as an adventurer as the rest of her crew, but then everybody starts referencing things that seemed really important for us to know. But they never explained it in detail. And then they try to make us care for Laura by throwing her into incredibly bad situations where she gets severely injured. Other than the fact that these scenes are incredibly uncomfortable to watch, they don't carry any weight, because they just don't show us any more about Laura's character. Okay, fine, she gets hurt, but so what? Everybody gets hurt. In fact, I think I got hurt from just making this video. Also, there wasn't any effective juxtaposition from Laura turning into this to this. I'm gonna get you, bastards. There was a scene from Skyfall which showed James Bond being vulnerable, but the way they handled it, it said so much about James Bond's character. After having a hard workout, he needed everybody else in the room to leave so nobody could see him, and then that's when he collapses. He didn't want anybody to see him in a weak state. This kind of characterization was lacking in Lara Croft's character. Sure, we don't need her to be exactly like James Bond, but there has to be more behind these scenes where we actually see Lara get injured. So if Tomb Raider doesn't show us everything we need to know, Far Cry 3 is the polar opposite. It shows us everything we need to know. The first minutes of this game show Jason Brody and his friends going on vacation, and they just show us being normal people. These guys weren't military buffheads or hardened adventurers. They were just normal guys. Nothing special about them. Kind of like you. Actually, Jason's brother was apt in combat training, but he gets murdered. This leaves Jason as the only one who can save any of his friends, but in order to do that, he has to grow into this warrior sort of character. So there you have it. Character motivation, a clear goal, and even a personal connection with the antagonist. It's also interesting how they convey the changes that Jason goes through. The entire game remains in first-person perspective. So as we're in Jason's perspective the entire time, we have to go off the things that Jason says and how people react towards him. Why, Jason? You certainly have grown stronger, more capable, and more badasser. Really now. I haven't noticed. But then there's the second part of this game, which is only really there to be there in order to just drag out the entire story. After you rescue all your friends and you kill the main bad guy, the story decides it needs you to fight some other guy who turns out to be the big bad of all the bad guys. The problem is that everything you've been doing prior has been building up on rescuing your friends and killing the antagonist that killed your brother. The big bad guy doesn't really have anything to do with Jason, and there's no real conflict when he's introduced. Wait. Who are you? Why, I'm the other bad guy in this game. Why should I care? Because I am just so darn evil. Okay, that's it, I'm leaving. No, wait, don't you want to see how the game ends? Far Cry 3 is an enjoyable experience, even if it isn't all that special. But it is a good example of basic storytelling, at least until the second half. So, with all that said, I would like other games to take note on how this game approaches its story, other than that entire second half. That part sucked.